I almost died as an infant. I had acute epiglottitis, and I was hospitalized with 106-degree temperature and convulsions. I've lived with so much fear coursing through my veins, and it felt very shameful every time I had a panic attack.
Priscilla is a New York Times bestselling author of The Faith Club, another New York Times bestseller, Learning to Breathe. And hot off the press is the new book, How to Fall in Love with Yourself.
I was beating myself up and wondering if I was being narcissistic, self-love and self-care are kind of, they're buzzwords. If you're going to approach somebody else from a place where you're lacking compassion for yourself, you're not going to get anywhere. She said, it's neither a gift or a burden. You are nothing special. All you're doing is slowing down and listening closely enough and being present enough. I'd like to take her through all the moments of my life where I was frightened and I was able to make a transition to joy. How brave I am now. I'm not afraid thanks to her and her courage, her creativity, her sense of humor.
If love could speak through you in this moment, what would love say?
Good job. Give yourself a hug. Eat some ice cream.
Welcome to Walking the Path of Love, a space for honest conversation about what it really means to live from a place of love, a place where we explore not just an idea, love as an idea, but as a practice, a devotion, a lived path. I'm your host, Charlyn Anandame Ryman, and wherever you are right now, I invite you to arrive here, just as you are, sinking into this moment of connection and exploration. It's an honor and a joy to be joined by Priscilla Warner today as our guest. So welcome, Priscilla. We're so grateful to walk together in this conversation. So thank you for being here. I'll do a brief introduction and then we'll get started. But Priscilla is a New York Times bestselling author of The Faith Club, which is a memoir about her interfaith relationship with two other New York City mothers. I love that book, and it's made such a wonderful shift in the world, I believe. So thank you for that book. And another New York Times bestseller is Learning to Breathe, which is a book that I've read many times, and it focuses really on that journey of healing through meditation. So two wonderful books. And hot off the press is the new book, How to Fall in Love with Yourself, which is a book we're going to focus a lot of our conversation today on, the book that really, Priscilla, connecting to your younger self through artwork and photos and lots of amazing practices, and really helping us, I think, to live from a place of wonder and joy and gratitude and hope and love. So to start our conversation, or before we start our conversation, you've so graciously agreed to do a centering practice with your Tibetan bowls. So I'd love to turn it over to you for helping us to get centered today before we start our conversation. Thank you, Priscilla.
Great. Let me just get my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. So these are antique Tibetan singing bowls. And I'm just going to guide you through a little bit of a grounding practice. There's 7 bowls that correspond to 7 chakras in your body. And there's nothing you need to learn, do, take away. Just enjoy the practice.
Thank you. So beautiful. Thank you for that.
My
I was
pleasure.
looking through your website. One of the quotes that you had on there was that you believe that one of the greatest gifts we can give others is sharing our vulnerable stories. And, I so agree with that, when we give ourselves permission to share, we often give others permission to live more fully into their truth and really opening a door to transformation. I just wanted to ask you a question around, like, how did you decide to share your stories? Like your books are memoir, and this, the latest book is just, so much of your story, and it takes courage and faith and intuition, all the things. Like, can you talk about that? Like, how did you get to that point?
I think it's so funny. I'm laughing because I was with one of our sons yesterday, and I was remembering that many years ago, when I wrote, maybe 15 years ago, I was writing for the Huffington Post, and we had an elderly
Mhm.
dog at that point I said, older dogs are great spiritual teachers. So I mentioned to my son, I
Mhm.
think I might write about that was Mickey, our first golden retriever. And, I think that would be a nice thing to share. And he said, I don't know, it's kind of personal. And I thought, that horse left the barn a long time ago. It's just, I don't know. I think that I just needed to say what I needed to say. And I think back now, I have no regrets about anything. But I think in many ways, my last book particularly came from a place of pain. The first book that I wrote, The Faith Club, also came from a place of pain after 9/11 and fear and
Mhm.
what I used to think of as negative feelings. But my sound healing teacher actually taught me from the very beginning that Westerners like to think of certain emotions as good or bad or healthy or unhealthy. But in fact, they're emotions, they're energy in motion.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
if you cling too much to the good ones, the good feelings when I'm playing the singing bowls, that
Yeah.
won't last. And if you cling to the bad feelings, they all shift and change. And
Mhm.
so I look back and I think they came from a place of pain. My second book came from a place of fear because I'd had hundreds of panic attacks all my life. But the wonderful
Mhm.
thing about this book is that it came from a place of love, which is why I loved when you reached out to me,
Mhm.
because walking the path of love is what I learned to do from my younger self. And I just, I'm really enjoying the process of sharing my stories from a place of love. But I get so many, I got so much response from people when I was writing more raw, painful, honest things.
Mhm.
This is all truly honest, but I'm glad to be sharing more love, more joy, and more hope in this book.
Yeah, yeah, the hope part is so powerful. Um, how would your younger self describe who you are now?
I think she'd get a kick out of me because I think I'm actually a lot like her. I say what's on my mind. I have a better filter now, but I think I would hope that she would think I was fun. I have a lot of younger friends in my life. I mean, you get to be a certain age and the pool is sort of, actually, the pool is expanding now for me. But I'd like to think that she would think that I'm brave, that I'm kind
Mhm.
and funny.
Creative. I could think of lots of other
Creative.
words, but
Thank you.
I love that. And I love the perspective of thinking back and forth and that connection between, between both those different parts of you. Could you share a story where love, not fear, guided your actions?
I lived in fear for so long. I almost died as an infant. I had
Mhm.
acute epiglottitis, and I was hospitalized with 106-degree temperature and convulsions. And this was the story of trauma that was passed on to me by my frightened parents, who were 26 at the time, I think, or maybe even younger.
Wow, wow.
And so I've lived with so much fear coursing through my veins, and it felt very shameful every time I had a panic attack. There was no word for panic back
Mhm.
then. So I would say fear lived inside of me and guided a lot of my decision making.
Mhm.
But I walked into a bar with a friend one night. My mother told my grandmother, "Don't worry, it wasn't a dive bar. It was a bar connected to a restaurant
Don't
in
worry."
Boston." And she was a little suspicious about the bar aspect. And I really wasn't looking for love at all. I was just out with my friend. And the guy across the room, he told me later, looked at me and said to his friend, "You see that girl? That's the kind of girl I could marry." And to this day, we've been married for 45 years. I've asked him, what was it? And he has no answer. I could make up an answer that was really like a rom-com, but I have many reasons why I think, I don't know. I just think it was a beautiful chance, God, divine moment, intuition or luck. I don't know. But his friend, he said, "That's the kind of girl I could marry." And his friend said, "You're in luck. I think I know the woman she's with." And so they came over and joined our table. And we closed down the bar that night. He only knew my first name and that I was an art director in an advertising agency that had a New York office. He was a New Yorker. And he called me the next day at work. I had no idea who he was. I said, "Are you a photographer?" "No." "Are you an illustrator?" "No." And he said, "I met you last night." And instead of saying, "This guy's a creep, what's he doing?" I said, "Oh my God, I have a lot of people in my office. I have to call you back." And so I emptied out my office, and I say in the book, I made a leap of faith. That section about meeting my husband is don't play it cool. I played it cool for a long time out of fear. I looked cool, but inside I was really frightened. And he swept me off my feet, and that's what happened. We at a first date, I just knew. I knew that weekend that when I don't know, I just knew that this was going to be a thing. I had a little picture of him, like a little yearbook photo in my head of what I kind of remembered. And when he rang the doorbell to my apartment building, I remember exactly what he looked like. He'd ridden his bike over. He had a red parka, curly hair, and I just took a leap. That's the only time that I had ever done that, and I don't know what guided me to do that. And he's been with me through all the panic attacks, and yeah.
I like to call it like your deep holy knowing, like when it's there, like, right? So has that helped to like kind of strengthen a muscle for trusting your intuition in other areas of your life? I mean, it must have, because your books had to be somewhat intuition or whatever that guidance or that synchronicity based. I mean,
Yeah, he gave me so much confidence. He gave me love. It was love at first sight. It was unconditional love. We both had backgrounds that did not provide that. And maybe it was a yearning we had for that. Maybe it was a knowing. Maybe that was the most important thing in life. Maybe it was an appreciation when we saw it. But I could get emotional. I mean, he gave me so much confidence throughout my life. And then, in a long relationship, things shift and grow and change. And I'd like to think I do tell him I've provided him with the same kind of ballast and groundedness when I
oh,
could.
yeah.
And it's been really interesting to see the shift but when I became a sound healer, which happened during COVID, I really stepped into a flow where I don't question things as much. And my intuition has been really heightened by this practice. When I play the bowls, sometimes I do sound baths for a lot of people, or I place them on people individually. And the first time I picked up on trauma in somebody else's body, I didn't try to do that. It's just that when you're in the flow of energy it's a little harder with lots of people in the room, but when you're one-on-one, even with a stranger, you pick up on things. And the first time it happened, I was totally freaked out. I don't usually, not totally, but I don't usually say anything. I wait after the sound bath is over. And if somebody mentions it, I get into it a little bit. If I feel it's right, I feel my way through it. But I was a little freaked out, and I spoke to my teacher the next time, who's an incredibly enlightened person, as all of my teachers are. I've had great spiritual teachers, but I said, "I don't know. Oh, I don't know. Why did I get started in this?" It sort of spooked me. I said, "Is it a gift or is it a burden? I can't figure out what I'm doing here." And she said to me in her very frank way, she said, "It's neither a gift or a burden. You are nothing special. All you're doing is slowing down and listening closely enough and being present enough so that you're seeing and hearing what's right in front of you. Anybody can do this, but they have to have a practice where they arrive at that space of stillness and knowing and that intuition. That's I think, strengthened my intuition more than any other practice that I've had, and I've done a lot of them.
How has your practice changed over the years, like your personal practice?
I used to, before I wrote my second book called Learning to Breathe, which was about healing from trauma, I had been on a long, extensive book tour for the Faith Club, like literally 3 years, 60 cities. We even went to the Middle East, and I had this panic disorder. So I was taking Klonopin to fly and Klonopin to speak publicly. And um, I was burnt out. And I came back to the East Coast from God knows where. And I called my literary agent. I was on a flight actually from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I opened up a Time magazine or something. And there was an article about monks who meditated so effectively that neuroscientists were studying their brain. I think it was at the University of Wisconsin. A lot of that took place. Richie Davidson. And I vowed then and there, I'm going to change my brain from a neurotic Jew to a serene Tibetan monk. And I got home and I called my literary agent. I said, it's either that or a book about my mother who was in her 10th year of Alzheimer's. And she said, no, go with the monk. And so that practice, before that, if things were upsetting me, I would occasionally sort of chant and say, please, God, give me patience and compassion. But because that was my experience as a child, and with the Faith Club was a sort of godlike presence. And once I learned how to meditate and settle into my own body, it became very somatic. And then in that book, I had the incredible opportunity to connect with Francine Shapiro, who developed a beautiful, very effective technique called EMDR therapy. And when I started, it was considered a little controversial, but now when she died, basically the New York Times issued sort of an apology about people. It's now really and truly a powerful PTSD therapy and used all over the world. So that and somatic experiencing, which Peter Levine developed, really helped me to begin to have a somatic practice. And then a friend of mine suggested, I think you should learn Reiki. And so I learned Reiki from a wonderful nurse who used it on surgeons before they went into surgery. I've had just the greatest teachers and guides in my whole experience. And I do self Reiki on myself now. So the meditation, I love metta because obviously it's about love. And that was Sharon Salzberg. I was on retreat with her. I was on retreat she was with Sylvia Boorstein. I had my children. Like I just picked up whatever I could, wherever I could find it, and incorporated it into my own life. And, Krishna Das, I'm in the room now where my husband once, I was really into Krishna Das, and I would just like chant, really turn it up and rocking out to Krishna Das and lighting a candle and everything. And my husband was downstairs making dinner. And when I was done with whatever I was chanting for half an hour or whatever, I came into the kitchen and he looked at me funny. I said, what? Because he doesn't do any of this stuff. I mean, he likes the singing bowls. I play them for him. But he said, I'm working very hard to get an image of you out of my mind. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I opened the door. And he just like saw me swaying and all by myself with Katie in the background. So I always do like to keep, I mean, the people say about my books is even the one about trauma and everything is that I have a sense of humor. And I think that's what saved me also. I think humor as a spiritual practice is incredibly important because it really is just, laughter is such a release and it's such a gratitude practice. There's nothing better than laughter as a gratitude practice. So.
Yeah. I love, part of my spiritual path is the Kripalu lineage. And there's these beautiful pictures of Swami Kripalu when he's telling stories and there's so much joy in his face and his expression. And it just always reminds me that, these practices and rituals and, they're they can be joy-filled. They don't need to be like these serious 10-step
Right.
processes. I mean, they can be. It's what's ever working, for each of us at certain times in our lives. But they certainly, that joy and that humor is such an important thread. And I
Yeah.
love the vision of
My
you
first teacher,
rocking out.
Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche, young Tibetan monk who'd had panic attacks as a child, he used humor from the start. It's just part of his being and part of his teaching. And he was always giggling. And I thought, why is this man laughing? I was on a 5-day quiet, silent spiritual retreat. And I thought, this is my first entry into meditation. I thought, I'd never be a monk. Like, this guy is so happy. And now one of my favorite things is after I play the bowls for people, I see their faces and they're transformed. And I love that. If I'm doing it one-on-one for a friend, I'll take a picture at the end and just say, look at you. Look who you can be. Look what's inside of you. Tara Brach talks about the golden Buddha inside of us. And,
Yes.
I love that practice too. I mean, I've tapped into that. And then the Reiki, and I think I put it in the book. Just put your hand on your heart.
Yes.
And also call yourself sweetheart is one of them.
Yes, that's what I was just going to talk about. Yes. So this beautiful picture here. Great. Yeah. So we're both on the same page, literally. So this is on page 64. And I love this practice of, hi, sweetheart. Like this page just made me cry when I read that. Can you talk about that as a practice? Like calling yourself sweetheart? That's so powerful.
A lot of people cry when they read my book. I mean, my other book too. Because it comes straight from the heart, I don't edit. And it's a huge compliment to me when people say to me, like one of my friends read it early on and she just said, I'm overwhelmed. I don't think I was asking her for a blurb. I just don't even know what to say. I'm so overwhelmed. And another friend just the other day said, I have to stop sometimes because I think that we so rarely tap into truth about ourselves, so that when I developed the ability to, thanks to this little girl, this one, no, she's younger. I mean, I have all different pictures of all different ages, but this was who I was. There was a lot of sadness to a lot of the pictures that my mother took of me. And I had this I cried a lot when I wrote the book. And then I kind of knew that was authenticity. My last book, Learning to Breathe, I met a rabbi and I said, why am I crying all the time? When I meet people who I know can help me, I cry. And he said that the Torah says that tears bathe the soul. And my literary agent for that book, she read the first draft and she said, it's great. I love it. She said, but I think you're going to have to change the name. I think we have to call it The Crying Game because you cry so much. And she was joking. They didn't change the title, but I take it as a real compliment. I forget what your question was at this point. We were talking about.
Oh, it was just about
did you ask
calling you sweetheart.
Oh, about sweetheart.
Just like placing her.
So
yeah. And I just it made me cry. And I love
the sweetest thing you can do to yourself. Like I really did used to call myself, as I wrote in the book, you stupid idiot, or worse. I liked to swear a lot. And I was my worst critic, my harshest critic of myself. And I was on retreat with Sylvia and Sharon, Sylvia Borstein and Sharon Salzberg. And I noticed like how tenderly they spoke to each other. And it really hit me. And also on that retreat, it was all about metta and loving yourself. So if you keep starting the practice saying, may I be safe, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I live with ease. Sylvia said, like, if that's your only practice, that would be a perfect practice. So that was sort of the doorway in. And at the time I was the primary caretaker. I had somebody I hired, but I was really taking care of my mother. And she was probably in her 10th year of Alzheimer's at that point. I literally had to leave the retreat to go outside to get a phone call from her psychiatrist or something because they were changing her meds. And Sharon really, really taught me that loving yourself first is not a selfish practice. We live in a society with so much narcissism. It's such a buzzword. And, I was beating myself up and wondering if I was being narcissistic, self-love and self-care or kind of, they're buzzwords, and to people who don't really know how important it is to love yourself before you can even begin to love somebody else, they don't resonate maybe as authentic. But I really learned from Sharon and Sylvia to love myself first before I could have compassion for anybody else. I'm finding that I can't find a compassionate place for myself to land, to be kind to other people who can be difficult. My mother used to say difficult people are our most powerful spiritual teachers. And she can be
Yeah.
difficult sometimes. So that was interesting. But, it's true that if you're going to approach somebody else from a place where you're lacking compassion for yourself, you're not going to get anywhere in summoning compassion for somebody who's difficult. So I do walk around and I love it. And I also with Reiki, I hug myself. I do all the stuff that I would have cringed and would never have been able to do. Yes. And like you can do some EMDR with tapping like this, which is very helpful. Francine Shapiro taught me that. I have a big toolkit with lots of tools that people have given me, and I'm super grateful for that.
Yeah. Oh, well, then thank you for sharing so much. So I'm going to share another one of my favorite pictures in the book, which is you a car, and you're in there traveling with your younger self. And this one is another one that made me cry. When I read the book, I just read it like a little bits at a time, and then again and again. And one of the things that I love is that at the bottom of many of the pages, there's like a question, which I used as like a journaling prompt, and then I love to journal and then collage over top. And the question on this particular page is, where would you like to take your younger self? And that's just so I love that. And I'm going to ask you that question, like, where would you like to take your younger self if you could go on a journey?
I'd like to take her through all the moments of my life where I was frightened and I was able to make a transition to joy. I like to show her what she taught me about those moments of fear. I like to show her how brave I am now. I'm not afraid, thanks to her and her courage, her creativity, her sense of humor, her lightheartedness, her hope, her joy. And I'd like to show her every step of the way of my life where I was frightened, but where she has now taught me compassion for myself in that situation. And to thank her for that. She really did. It's funny, I refer to her as she, but, I have 4 grandchildren. We have 4 grandchildren, and they come into this world pure love. And even when they're crying, yesterday with our 1-year-old grandson, and he was crying, but it was adorable because one of my favorite collages in the book, I have to say, I found these slides that my mother had saved, these old Kodachrome slides. The lesson is, don't throw out your children's art and try to find a way to save. Everybody, we live in this instant culture now where you post something on Instagram and then like, who knows where it goes. But I found this slide of me. I just think it's hilarious
yes.
So I've seen my grandchildren through all kinds of emotional whatever, but when expressions and when we're adults, we don't cut ourselves any slack. Like, we don't cry in public like this. I don't know what the situation was. Somebody was next to me, not this illustration. I combined the illustrations with photographs, but we don't cut ourselves any slack.
No.
And I hope that this book really will teach me how to have a wide range of emotions and how to validate myself every step of the way, thanks to my younger self.
I love that. And what a wonderful gift for your grandchildren to have that safe place with you to express those emotions and just being able to, feel held. I love
That's
that.
why I
I
wrote the
love that.
book, really. I wrote it for my grandchildren because our first grandson, when he was born, I looked into his eyes and I thought, how long will I know you?
Mm,
Not how long will you know
mm,
me? And I'm glad that I have books that show them who I was and what I stood for in life. But I really wrote it for them. I thought about them and channeled them the whole way and just thought,
mhm.
what would I like to teach them? And what would I like to teach the people that I love and people that I've never met? And the lessons that this little girl taught me just kept
Yeah.
flowing into my
Yes.
consciousness. But yeah, I really did dedicate it to my children and grandchildren. My children know because I've written books from the heart before, but I like I like just the colors and the joy just show
Yes.
you what's
Yes.
inside of yourself. You know, that I really
Mhm.
worked with a wonderful book designer who's a dear friend and sound healer. And I kept saying, pump up the saturation. You know, I want it to be so joyful.
Yes.
And
Oh, it certainly
so
is. And I've shared this with my grandchildren and plan to share it more. But they were just so like so excited to see like these drawings and that you were in there too, and just like staring at these pages. And like this is one of my favorite too. And just
yeah,
to
I
say
love
like
that one.
this is Priscilla and this is Priscilla, like she's there, microdose joy. So,
I think it's
well,
a great
thank you.
teaching that we all have all of these facets of ourselves inside of ourselves,
Yes. Yeah.
including, difficult passages that were imprinted on us, difficult emotions. But that joy throughout the book, I was really inspired by the yellow suns that I drew because they're all over the book. And they were all over my drawings. I thought that I had an unhappy childhood and I wrote about it and I wrote about trauma and I wrote about the
Mhm.
difficulties in my childhood upbringing. But if you look at this, it's just one
Mhm.
facet of who I was. And this.
Oh, yes,
But
yes.
the joy in that one microdose joy, it was on a ferry. Um,
Oh.
it was at sunset, and all those moments. One more one that I love is Click Click, which is about my mother who she was a complicated person. She was artistic and sensitive and expressive. And at the end of her life, she didn't know who I was for the last 2 years of her life. I would visit her in the nursing home and she had no idea. I say I could have been like a waitress serving her something. But
Mhm.
I did go in one day when she was napping and it was a very busy day. I had to drive. She lived in Providence and I had to drive up there and go see her lawyer and one of the doctors and I forget who else, but I had to leave her a little more quickly than I would have liked. And I bent down at her bedside and I went to give her a kiss goodbye. I said, I'm sorry, I have to go, but I've got to get to your lawyer before the office closes. And she made this funny sound. And I said, what did you say? And she said, click, click. I'm taking a picture of you so that I can remember.
Mm.
And so I feel
That
like this
is
entire book, I'm
Mhm.
looking for the collage of that, but I really feel like the entire book was a big click click to her. Like I took it to
Mm.
heart. I don't take anything for granted. I have 100,000 photos on my phone. I'm present for every moment. And I have her to thank for that. Click click is a great practice for being in the present moment.
Oh, I love it. My grandchildren were here this past weekend or 2 weekends ago. And I just used that as a practice, like through the whole weekend.
I
Like
love that.
they were running in the field. And I have a 3-year-old granddaughter, and she's so independent. And we're going through the field, and she's like, Nanny, you go this way, and I'm going to go this way. And she was just getting further and further away, and she kept turning back. And I was doing like the click, click practice. I'm like, I don't ever want to forget this moment. Like, I want to be so
Totally.
present that I can feel this moment in my body and allow that to resonate through
Yeah.
the whole rest of the day or my life. And so I'm so grateful
Yeah.
for that practice. So thank you for sharing
I
so
want
many of these
every ice
practices.
cream cone to be the best ice cream cone I've ever had. My mother, there's another
Yes.
collage. This was the click click moment where, like, I'm driving
Mm,
past a farm
mm,
and I see these two sheep, like, just
mm.
standing just like that. So I got out my camera and click click. But
Click,
but
click.
my the wonderful nurse who took care of my mother in nursing home, Chris, she told me a story after she died. She said, I would bring your mother ice cream every night, and she would tap her feet with delight. And so, there's an
Oh,
anecdote about how I stopped at a rest stop on the highway. And there were it was 11 o'clock in the morning, and these women about my age were eating ice cream in the food court. And I thought, wow, ice cream at 11 o'clock in the morning, you go. And, I'm not sure if I've ever started with at 11 o'clock in the morning, but yeah, the lessons, I like to go back and read it and just take my time and just flip on any page. And somebody wrote to me, every page is an opportunity to be in the present moment. Every page is a click, click moment where you take note of it. And
yeah.
I just love this
Yeah.
book. I'm glad you did
I do
too.
too. I do too. Yes. And we definitely can continue this conversation at maybe another episode of Walking the Love podcast. But
You know where to find me.
yes, as we wrap up today, I would love for you to answer the following. So, if love could speak through you in this moment, what would love say?
Good job.
Hmm.
Give
Good
yourself a
job.
hug. Eat some ice cream. Spread the love. That's what I'm not self-conscious now when I talk about love to people. This was like my love manifesto. And so I think, we live in a culture where we don't talk about pure love enough. So
Yeah, we put love in a little box sometimes. So thank you for letting love out of the box in a really, really big way and for our conversation.
Thank you.
To end, I thought we could maybe do a little meditation together, with you and I and all of our guests. And maybe we could just close eyes gently or gaze inward and just imagine walking through the woods with me. And we notice the smells of the damp forest floor, maybe the smells of wildflowers, a cool breeze on our skin. And as we navigate through a thicket of wild blackberry bushes, we spy a huge gray rock, the magic rock that you talk about in your book, The Big Magic Rock. And it's a place for stories and meetings and stages for song and plays and dance. And we climb onto the rock together. And on this rock, we receive an invitation to be anyone that we want to be. And just imagine, who would you want to be standing on that magic rock? Who would you want to be? And just breathe that in, knowing when we connect to this place of love and intuition and infinite possibilities, everything is possible. Thank you, Priscilla, for sharing, for bringing your voice and your presence, your wisdom, and your path into this space. I'm really, really grateful. And as we go on our way, I would just really encourage everyone to certainly buy this book and, take some time to journal and to reflect on what this conversation meant to you, what resonated with you, and maybe share some of that, with others in whatever way feels right for you. So thank you. Thank you,
Thank you
Priscilla.
so
Thanks to
much. This was
everyone.
really fun.